The sound of my wife's laughter drifting from the kitchen should have been music to my ears. Instead, it felt like nails on a chalkboard because I knew exactly who was making her laugh like that. Through the doorway, I watched Sarah throw her head back, giggling at something her brother Derek had just said, while he lounged in my favorite chair like he owned the place. "Oh, Derek, you're terrible!" Sarah gasped between fits of laughter. "I can't believe you told your boss that." Derek, unemployed for 8 months now, living in our guest room rent-free, grinned smugly. "What can I say? Some of us have the guts to speak truth to power." I cleared my throat as I entered the kitchen. "Morning, honey." Derek. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Sarah's smile flickered, and Derek barely acknowledged me with a grunt before returning to his phone. "Coffee's fresh," Sarah said, her voice suddenly strained. "I made extra." Of course she did. She always made extra when her precious brother was around. Derek had been temporarily staying with us since losing his job at the marketing firm, something about creative differences with management, though I suspected it had more to do with his habit of showing up late and leaving early. "Thanks." I poured myself a cup and leaned against the counter. "Any job interviews today, Derek?" He looked up from his phone with barely concealed irritation. "Actually, I'm meeting with a potential business partner about a startup opportunity. Not that it's any of your business." "A startup." I kept my voice neutral. "Sounds promising. What kind of business?" "Social media consulting. Companies pay big money for authentic engagement strategies." I nearly choked on my coffee. Derek's idea of authentic engagement was posting gym selfies and motivational quotes he'd stolen from Instagram influencers. Sarah shot me a warning look. "Derek's always been entrepreneurial. Remember that food truck idea?" Oh, I remembered. The food truck that never materialized despite Derek borrowing $3,000 from us for startup costs, money we never saw again. "Right," I said. "Well, good luck with the meeting." Derek smirked. "Luck's got nothing to do with it. Some people understand vision, others just punch the clock." The dig was obvious. I'd been working as a project manager at a construction company for 12 years. Steady work, decent pay, nothing glamorous. But it kept the lights on and the mortgage paid while Derek pursued his various visions. "Speaking of punching clocks," I said, checking my watch, "I should head out." "Big meeting with the Henderson account today." "The Henderson project?" Sarah perked up. "That's the new shopping complex, right?" Derek was just telling me about his ideas for their marketing campaign. I stared at her. Derek doesn't work for Henderson Construction. "No, but he could consult on their social media presence. You could introduce him to the right people." The audacity was breathtaking. Derek wanted me to leverage my professional relationships to get him work, despite never showing an ounce of gratitude for the roof over his head or the food in his belly. "I'll think about it," I lied. Derek's phone buzzed and he glanced at it, frowning. Shit. My meeting got moved to 10:30. "Language," Sarah chided gently. "Sorry, sis, but this is important. This could be my big break." I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. "Have a great day, you two." Outside, I sat in my truck for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. 8 months. 8 months of Derek treating my house like a hotel, my wife like a personal chef, and me like an inconvenience. 8 months of Sarah making excuses for her brother's laziness while expecting me to smile and play the gracious host. My phone buzzed with a text from my buddy Mike. "Drinks after work? Haven't seen you in weeks." I realized he was right. Between work stress and the Derek situation, I'd been isolating myself from friends. Maybe a beer and some normal conversation was exactly what I needed. I texted back, "Definitely. Murphy's Tavern at 6? See you there?" The workday dragged. The Henderson meeting went well. They approved our revised timeline and budget, but I couldn't shake my irritation about Derek's assumption that I'd hand him opportunities he hadn't earned. By 6 o'clock, I was ready for that beer. Murphy's Tavern was a dive bar 3 blocks from the construction office. The kind of place where everyone knew your name and your drink order. Mike was already there when I arrived, sitting at our usual table with Tom and Jennifer from our old college group. "Look what the cat dragged in," Mike called out as I approached. "We were starting to think you'd forgotten about us little people." "Very funny." I pulled up a chair and signaled the bartender. "Just been dealing with some family stuff." "Family stuff?" Jennifer raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay with Sarah?" "Sarah's fine. It's her brother. He's been staying with us since he lost his job and it's getting old fast." Tom nodded sympathetically. "The unemployed relative situation. Been there." "How long has it been?" 8 months. Mike whistled low. 8 months? Dude, that's not a visit, that's a residency. Tell me about it. And the worst part is Sarah keeps making excuses for him. Today, she wanted me to help him get consulting work with one of my clients. "What kind of work does he do?" Jennifer asked. "That's the million-dollar question. He calls himself an entrepreneur, but mostly he just talks about his vision while eating our food and using our Wi-Fi." The bartender brought my beer and I took a long pull, feeling some of the day's tension ease. "So, what are you going to do about it?" Mike asked. "What can I do? He's Sarah's brother. If I push too hard, it'll cause problems in my marriage." Tom shook his head. "Man, you're being too nice. At some point, you have to set boundaries. Easy for you to say. You don't have to go home to the guy every night." "Actually," Jennifer said carefully, "I've been meaning to ask you about something. Derek reached out to me last week about a job opportunity at my company. I nearly spit out my beer." "What?" "He said you'd recommended him for our social media coordinator position. Said you thought he'd be perfect for it." The blood drained from my face. "I never said that. I didn't even know you had an opening." Jennifer's expression darkened. "He seemed pretty confident you'd put in a good word. Even mentioned specific details about our marketing budget that he couldn't have known unless someone told him." "Jennifer, I swear I had no idea he was doing this." "It gets worse," she continued. "He name-dropped all of you guys, said he was practically family with our whole group, made it sound like we were all best friends." Mike and Tom exchanged glances. The mood at the table had shifted from friendly to tense. "What did you tell him?" I asked. "I told him I'd consider his application, but honestly, something felt off about the whole conversation. Now I know why. I felt sick. Derek hadn't just crossed a line. He'd used my name and my friendships to do it." "There's more," Tom said quietly. "He contacted me too. Said you'd mentioned I might have freelance graphic design work for his startup." "And me," Mike added. "Wanted to know if my company was hiring sales reps. Said you'd already talked to me about it." I stared at them, horrified. "Guys, I had no idea. I would never—" "We know," Jennifer said, but her tone was cooler than before. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" The weight of their expectations settled on my shoulders. My friends were looking at me like I was responsible for Derek's behavior, and maybe I was. By letting him stay in my house, by not setting clear boundaries, I'd enabled this situation. "I'll talk to him," I said. "Talk to him?" Mike's voice had an edge. "Dude, he's been using your name to scam job opportunities. That's not a conversation problem, that's a character problem." "He's family," I protested weakly. "He's a user," Tom shot back. "And you're letting him drag your reputation down with his." The conversation continued for another hour, but the easy camaraderie was gone. When we finally called it a night, the goodbyes were stilted and awkward. I could see the disappointment in their eyes, the feeling that I'd somehow betrayed their trust by association. The drive home was torture. Derek's actions weren't just affecting me anymore. They were poisoning my relationships with people I'd known for years, people who mattered to me. I found Sarah and Derek in the living room, watching some reality show about entrepreneurs pitching business ideas. "How was your meeting?" Sarah asked as I sat down. Derek didn't look away from the TV. "Postponed again. The guy's assistant said he'd call to reschedule. I'd bet money there was no meeting, no business partner, no startup opportunity. Just another one of Derek's fantasies. Derek, I said, keeping my voice level, I need to talk to you about something. Now he looked at me, eyebrows raised in mild annoyance. I ran into Jennifer tonight. She mentioned you'd contacted her about a job. Sarah perked up. Oh, that's great. I told you Derek was being proactive about his job search. The problem is, I continued, he told her I'd recommended him. I didn't. Derek shrugged. I might have mentioned that you thought I'd be good for that kind of work. When did I say that? It was implied. You know, general supportive comments. Derek, you also contacted Mike and Tom. Used my name with them too. Sarah looked between us, confusion creeping into her expression. What's the big deal? You're always saying how talented Derek is. I've never said that, I replied flatly. The room went dead silent. Sarah's face flushed red. Excuse me. I've never said Derek was talented. I've never recommended him for anything, and I'm tired of pretending otherwise. Derek finally muted the TV. Wow. Tell me how you really feel. You want to know how I really feel? I stood up, 8 months of frustration boiling over. I feel like I'm being taken advantage of. You've been living here rent-free for 8 months, eating our food, using our utilities, and now you're using my name to hustle my friends for jobs you're not qualified for. I'm qualified? For what? You got fired from your last job for attendance issues. Before that, you quit 3 jobs in 2 years because they didn't appreciate your vision. You've never successfully completed a single business venture, but you keep talking about being an entrepreneur. Sarah stood up too, her face furious. How dare you talk to my brother like that? Your brother is a 34-year-old man who's been mooching off us for most of a year. He's family. He's a user. The words exploded out of me. And the worst part is, you enable him. You make excuses for him, you baby him, and you expect me to smile and pretend everything's fine while he takes advantage of our hospitality and damages my friendships? Derek stood up slowly, his face dark. I think you need to check your tone. My tone? I laughed bitterly. This is my house, Derek. I'll use whatever tone I want. Actually, he said with a smug smile, Sarah's name is on the deed too. So it's her house as much as yours. The implication was clear. Sarah would choose him over me if it came down to it. And looking at my wife's face, I wasn't sure he was wrong. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of my house. Tonight. Sarah gasped. You can't be serious? I'm dead serious. Derek, you have 1 hour to pack your things and leave. Derek crossed his arms. And if I don't? Then I'll call the police and have you removed for trespassing. You wouldn't dare. I pulled out my phone. Try me. For a moment, we stared at each other. Then Derek's composure cracked. Fine. But don't come crawling to me when you need a favor someday. Don't expect me to help you network or introduce you to important people. The delusion was staggering. Derek thought he was the one with valuable connections. I'll take that risk, I said. He stormed upstairs to pack, and Sarah turned on me with fury I'd never seen before. I can't believe you just did that. I can't believe it took me 8 months to do it. He's my brother, my family, and I'm your husband. Doesn't that count for anything? She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it. The hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Derek came downstairs 20 minutes later with 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. He paused at the door. This isn't over, he said. Yeah, it is. After he left, Sarah and I stood in our living room in toxic silence. Finally, she spoke. I'll never forgive you for this. I can live with that. She went upstairs without another word. I heard our bedroom door slam, then the guest room door. She was sleeping separately, making her position clear. I sat alone in the living room, feeling hollow. My marriage might be over, but at least Derek was gone. It was a Pyrrhic victory at best. The next few weeks were brutal. Sarah barely spoke to me, communicating mainly through cold, clipped sentences about practical matters. Derek had moved in with a friend across town but kept texting Sarah about how unfairly he'd been treated. Worse, my friendships were still strained. Mike had been understanding when I called to explain the situation, but Tom and Jennifer remained distant. The damage to my reputation would take time to repair, if it could be repaired at all. Then Derek made his final mistake. I was having lunch at a deli near my office when I overheard two women talking at the next table. "I can't believe that guy had the nerve to show up at the networking event," one was saying. "Right? After what he pulled with the Henderson account." My ears perked up. I knew those women. They worked for a marketing firm that sometimes partnered with construction companies. "What happened with Henderson?" the other woman asked. "Some guy named Derek crashed their client meeting yesterday, claimed he was a consultant working with their construction partner, started pitching social media strategies nobody asked for." My blood ran cold. Security had to escort him out. Apparently, he name-dropped some project manager, said they were practically business partners. I paid my check and left, my hands shaking with rage. Derek hadn't learned his lesson. He'd escalated. Now, he was directly interfering with my actual work, potentially damaging relationships I'd spent years building. I called the Henderson office immediately. "Mr. Peterson," the receptionist said when I identified myself. "Mr. Henderson wants to speak with you about yesterday's incident. I can explain everything. Please hold." James Henderson came on the line a moment later, his voice stern. "We need to talk." My office. 1 hour. The meeting was excruciating. I had to explain that Derek was my brother-in-law, that I'd had no knowledge of his actions, and that he'd been explicitly told not to use my name for his schemes. Henderson was professional but clearly unhappy about the situation. "I understand family complications," he said finally, "but I can't have unauthorized people disrupting our business operations. If this happens again, we'll need to reconsider our partnership." I assured him it wouldn't happen again, but I knew Derek wouldn't stop on his own. He was too arrogant, too entitled, too convinced that the world owed him success without effort. That night, I made a decision. I spent the weekend gathering evidence. Derek's social media posts about his consulting work, screenshots of his LinkedIn profile, where he'd listed himself as a strategic partner with my company, records of his attempts to contact my clients and friends. Then I did something Derek would never expect from boring, unimaginative me. I got creative. On Monday morning, I created a simple website called DerekWilsonTruth.com. I uploaded all the evidence I'd gathered, along with a clear, factual timeline of Derek's behavior. No emotional language, no personal attacks, just documented facts about his pattern of misrepresentation and professional misconduct. Then I sent the link to everyone Derek had contacted, along with a brief, professional email explaining the situation and apologizing for any confusion his actions had caused. The response was immediate. Jennifer called within an hour. "Holy shit," she said. "I mean, I knew something was off about him, but this is next-level delusional. I'm sorry he dragged you into this mess. Don't apologize. This actually helps a lot. I was worried I'd misjudged the situation." Tom and Mike called with similar reactions. Seeing the full scope of Derek's deception actually restored their faith in my judgment. They realized I'd been a victim, not an enabler. But Derek wasn't done. He showed up at my office Wednesday afternoon, furious and desperate. "Take down that website!" he demanded, storming into my cubicle. "No! You're ruining my reputation." "You ruined your reputation. I just documented it. Sarah's going to leave you over this." I looked at him calmly. "Maybe, but at least she'll know the truth about who you really are." That evening, Sarah confronted me at home. She'd seen the website. Derek had sent her the link, probably hoping she'd be outraged on his behalf. "Did you really need to humiliate him publicly?" she asked. "I needed to protect my career and my relationships. Derek made that necessary. He's family. He's a liar and a con artist who's been using our hospitality to run scams. For the first time since Derek left, Sarah looked uncertain. The Henderson thing really happened? Yes. And it nearly cost me a major client. She sat down heavily on the couch. I had no idea it was that serious. Because you didn't want to see it. You wanted to believe Derek was just going through a rough patch, that he'd figure things out if we just supported him long enough. Maybe I did. There's no maybe about it. You chose to believe his lies because the truth was too uncomfortable. We talked for hours that night. Really talked, for the first time in months. Sarah admitted she'd known Derek was exaggerating his job prospects and business connections, but she'd hoped that eventually his confidence would translate into actual success. I wanted to believe in him, she said finally. He's my little brother. I understand that, but enabling his delusions wasn't helping him. It was making things worse. The website had done its job. Derek's attempts to network in our professional circles came to an abrupt halt when people started recognizing his name and avoiding him. Word spread quickly in our small business community about his tactics. A month later, Derek left town entirely. Sarah heard from their mother that he'd moved to Phoenix, claiming he needed a fresh start, somewhere people would appreciate his vision. Sarah and I worked on rebuilding our marriage. It wasn't easy. Trust, once broken, takes time to repair. But we were both committed to making it work. 6 months after Derek left, I got a call from Mike. "You need to see this," he said, sending me a link to a news article. The headline read, "Phoenix Marketing Consultant Arrested for Identity Theft." Derek had been caught using fake credentials and stolen personal information to land consulting contracts. The article detailed a pattern of behavior stretching back years. Apparently, his schemes in our town had been just the latest in a long series. I showed the article to Sarah. She read it in silence, her face pale. "I'm sorry," she said finally. "I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. You wanted to see the best in him. That's not a character flaw. It is when it blinds you to the truth." We never heard from Derek again. Sarah's mother mentioned that he'd been sentenced to 2 years in prison and had cut contact with the family, claiming they'd abandoned him in his time of need. The last laugh, it turned out, was mine after all.